My name is Isabel Brennan, and I'm 28 years old. 6 months ago, my parents stood in front of 75 wedding guests and told me the greatest gift I could give my sister was to disappear from her life forever. They said my presence would ruin her perfect day, that I was an embarrassment to the family name. What they didn't know was that I held the power to ruin much more than just one day. The champagne glass that slipped from my trembling hand became the catalyst for exposing decades of lies, hidden documents, and a fortune they never knew existed. Before I share what happened at that rehearsal dinner, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you genuinely connect with stories about setting boundaries with toxic families. I'm curious where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop a comment below. It helps me know I'm not alone in this journey. Let me take you back to that night at the St. Regis Hotel in Connecticut, where my sister Victoria's fairy tale was about to become my awakening. The St. Regis ballroom sparkled with the kind of elegance that only old money could buy. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the marble floor, while servers in white gloves circulated with champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's car payments. 75 of Connecticut's elite had gathered for Victoria's rehearsal dinner. Senators, hedge fund managers, and socialites whose names regularly graced the society pages. Victoria stood at the center of it all, radiant in her $15,000 Oscar de la Renta cocktail dress, her laugh tinkling like the champagne flutes that clinked in her honor. Every detail had been orchestrated to perfection. The orchid centerpieces flown in from Thailand, the seven-course menu designed by a Michelin-starred chef, the string quartet playing softly in the corner. And then there was me, in my simple black sheath dress from Nordstrom Rack, price tag carefully removed, but the $200 purchase still making my credit card ache. I stood near the service entrance, clipboard in hand, checking and rechecking the evening's timeline. While Victoria floated through the room like royalty, I counted place cards and worried about the vegetarian options for table 12. Isabel, the flowers at table 3 are wilting, my mother hissed as she passed, not even making eye contact. Fix it. Quietly. I nodded, already moving toward the offending arrangement. This was my role, invisible, efficient, necessary, but never acknowledged. I'd spent 6 months planning every detail of this wedding, from hand-addressing 500 invitations to negotiating with 12 different vendors. Yet as far as the guests knew, I might as well have been part of the hotel staff. But that was about to change in ways none of us could have imagined. Ladies and gentlemen, my mother's voice rang out, commanding instant attention. Margaret Brennan had that effect on people. 68 years of privilege had taught her exactly how to own a room. I want you all to meet the bride-to-be, my precious Victoria, who's about to join the distinguished Harrison family. She wrapped an arm around Victoria's waist, pulling her close as cameras flashed. The two of them looked like a magazine spread, matching blonde highlights, designer gowns, diamonds catching the light. My father, Robert, joined them, his silver hair gleaming as he raised his glass in a toast. To our beautiful daughter, he boomed, who has made us prouder than words can express. Senator Harrison approached, his wife Eleanor beside him. Robert, Margaret, you must be so proud of Victoria, such an accomplished young woman. He paused, glancing around. Will your other daughter be joining us? The silence stretched for a heartbeat too long. Other daughter? My mother's laugh was crystalline, practiced. Oh, you mean Isabel? She gestured vaguely in my direction without looking. She's helping with the arrangements. She's very helpful with these sorts of things. The senator's wife followed my mother's gesture, her eyes landing on me as I adjusted a centerpiece. Oh, I see. How nice that she's so involved. The word hung in the air like a polite insult. Not talented or dedicated, just involved. Like I was a hobbyist who'd wandered in off the street. Victoria's tinkling laugh cut through the moment. Isabel's always been good with the behind-the-scenes stuff. Some people are just meant for the spotlight and others. She trailed off with a delicate shrug. My hands tightened on the clipboard, but I kept my expression neutral. professional, calm. But that was about to change. 6 months earlier, I'd sat in my parents' living room, volunteer forms spread across the coffee table. I want to handle Victoria's wedding, I'd announced, trying to keep the hope out of my voice. All of it, the planning, coordination, everything. Victoria had looked up from her phone, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow raised. You? Isabel, you can barely match your socks, just don't mess it up like usual. Like when she tried to help with the charity gala, my mother added, not looking up from her magazine. We're still apologizing for that disaster. I'd accidentally double-booked the venue, a mistake that happened because they'd given me the wrong date to begin with. But that detail had been conveniently forgotten. Maybe stick to simple tasks, my father had said, his tone dismissive. We can hire a real wedding planner for the important decisions. I have a degree from Parsons, I reminded them quietly. I graduated summa cum laude. Interior design includes event planning. Online courses hardly count as Parsons, dear. Victoria had laughed, even though she knew I'd attended in person, even though she'd been at my graduation. Or rather, she'd been in the parking lot, complaining about the traffic. But I'd persisted. For 6 months, I worked 16-hour days without pay, without thanks, without recognition. I negotiated vendor contracts that saved them $30,000. I hand-calligraphed 500 invitations when the professional they'd hired fell through. I solved crisis after crisis, from the caterer's bankruptcy to the venue's double booking. And through it all, I told myself it would be worth it. That finally, they'd see my value. Standing in that ballroom now, watching them erase me from existence with every introduction, I realized how wrong I'd been. The lights dimmed and a screen descended from the ceiling. We have a special surprise, my mother announced, her voice warm with the kind of maternal pride I'd only witnessed from afar. A little walk down memory lane for our Victoria. The slideshow began, a carefully curated history of the Brennan family's golden child. Baby Victoria in her christening gown. Victoria at 5, winning her first beauty pageant. Victoria at 16, debutante ball. Victoria at Harvard graduation. Victoria with senators, with celebrities, with everyone who mattered. 47 photos in total. I counted because I had nothing else to do but stand there and watch myself be erased from our family's history. Not one photo included me. Not the Christmas mornings we'd shared, not the family vacations, not even the group shots where I knew I'd been standing right there, just outside the frame. Such a beautiful family, someone murmured behind me. Does Victoria have any siblings? Another guest asked. My mother's response carried across the room with perfect clarity. She's our only child who matters in moments like these. The words weren't even cruel anymore. They were just fact, stated as simply as the weather forecast. The champagne glass in my hand started to shake, tiny ripples disturbing the golden surface. A woman I didn't recognize leaned toward her companion. Isn't that their other daughter, the one by the service door? I think she's the wedding planner, her friend whispered back. Or maybe she works for the hotel. I set down the trembling glass carefully, precisely, the way I'd learned to do everything in this family, without making a sound, without leaving a trace. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Something inside me was beginning to crack, hairline fractures spreading through 28 years of practiced invisibility. What most people didn't know was that I wasn't just the forgotten daughter playing party planner. For the past 4 years, I'd been managing the family's investment property, a 23-unit apartment building in downtown Stamford that generated $400,000 annually. Every lease negotiation, every maintenance crisis, every tenant dispute. I handled it all while my parents collected the checks. Isabel, Victoria appeared beside me, her voice honey-sweet. After the wedding, Daddy's transferring the Stamford property to me and Harrison. We'll need you to train our property manager, of course. Shouldn't take more than a few months of your time. The property I've been managing? I kept my voice level. Well, managing is a strong word. You've been overseeing things. But now that I'm joining the Harrison family, we need to elevate our portfolio. Professional management, you understand. I understood perfectly. 4 years of 3 a.m. emergency calls, of negotiating with contractors, of turning a building with 40% vacancy into one with a waiting list. All of it would be handed to Victoria like everything else. The lease agreements, I said carefully. They'll need to be reviewed. Victoria waved dismissively. Harrison's lawyers will handle all that. Oh, and Mother wants you to move out of the penthouse by next month. We're converting it to an Airbnb, so much more profitable than family discounts. The penthouse where I'd lived for 3 years, paying market rent, despite managing the building for free. 23 tenants whose names I knew, whose kids I'd watched grow up, whose lives I'd become part of. All of it would be stripped away like I'd never existed. Of course, I heard myself say, the words automatic. Whatever the family needs. But for the first time, I wondered what would happen if I stopped being what the family needed. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, type "seen" in the comments. I read every single one, and it helps me know I'm not alone in this experience. Also, what would you have done in my situation? Stayed silent or spoken up? Let me know below while I tell you what happened when that champagne glass slipped. Because what came next changed everything, and I mean everything. The champagne, the scream, the words that would echo through that ballroom. It all started with my trembling hands and ended with documents no one knew existed. Let me show you how it unfolded. My hands hadn't stopped shaking since the slideshow. I reached for a fresh glass of champagne from a passing tray, trying to steady my nerves, trying to be invisible just a little longer. The crystal was slippery with condensation, and as I lifted it, my trembling fingers betrayed me. The glass tilted. 3 drops, just 3 tiny drops, arced through the air in what felt like slow motion. They landed on Victoria's dress, nearly invisible against the cream-colored silk, no bigger than tears. But Victoria's scream could have shattered the chandeliers. "My dress!" She spun around, her face contorted with rage. "You clumsy idiot! You've ruined everything!" 75 heads turned in unison. Conversations died mid-sentence. The string quartet stopped playing. In the sudden silence, everyone stared at the spectacle. Victoria, the beautiful bride, pointing at me with theatrical horror, and me, frozen with an empty glass in my hand. "Look what she's done!" Victoria grabbed her mother's arm, gesturing at the microscopic spots. "This dress cost more than her car." I looked at the spots, 3 tiny dots you'd need a magnifying glass to see. The dress wasn't ruined. It wasn't even noticeably stained. But that didn't matter. This wasn't about the dress. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I'll pay for the cleaning." "Cleaning?" My mother's voice cut through the air like a blade. "This is a Vera Wang original. It's destroyed." The guests pressed closer, phones appearing in hands, everyone wanting to capture the drama. Someone was definitely recording. I saw the red light on their phone, saw them zoom in on my face. "Typical Isabel," Victoria said loudly, playing to her audience. "She ruins everything she touches." The room held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. "You ruin everything!" My mother's voice rose to a pitch I'd never heard before. "Every single time we try to have something nice, something special, you destroy it. Can't you do one thing right?" My father's face had turned purple, a vein pulsing at his temple. "One thing without destroying it?" Victoria had started to cry. Perfect crystalline tears that didn't disturb her makeup. "My wedding is ruined," she sobbed into Harrison's shoulder. "She always does this. She's always been jealous of me." The crowd pressed closer, their whispers creating a low hum of judgment. I caught fragments. How embarrassing. Poor Victoria. Some people just don't belong. "It's 3 drops," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The dress isn't ruined." "Don't you dare minimize this," my mother hissed. She turned to the crowd, her voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "I apologize for my daughter's behavior. She's always been difficult." Senator Harrison's wife shook her head sympathetically. "These things happen, Margaret. Though perhaps, she glanced meaningfully at me, perhaps some people aren't suited for certain occasions. You're absolutely right, my father said, his jaw clenched. He looked at me with something beyond anger. It was complete dismissal, like I was a problem to be solved rather than his daughter. Then my father stood up, his chair scraping against the marble floor. He raised his hand for silence, and the room obeyed instantly. Robert Brennan commanded that kind of respect, built on decades of business dominance and social positioning. I have something to say, he announced, his voice carrying the weight of finality. The air in the room became electric with anticipation. In the corner of the ballroom, almost hidden behind a marble column, sat my grandmother, Eleanor. At 85, she commanded attention even in stillness. Silver hair pulled into an elegant chignon, wearing the kind of understated black dress that whispered rather than shouted its price tag. She hadn't said a word all evening. While others gasped and whispered, while phones recorded and my parents raged, Eleanor Brennan sat perfectly still, her eyes sharp as surgical instruments. She wasn't watching the spectacle, she was studying it, analyzing it, like a chess master observing pieces on a board. In her lap sat a small leather notebook, the kind she'd carried for decades. Her fountain pen moved across the page in quick, precise strokes. Writing what? I couldn't tell from where I stood, but I saw her underline something twice, the gesture deliberate and final. Our eyes met across the chaos. While 74 people watched my humiliation with either pity or entertainment, Eleanor looked at me with something else entirely. She gave the slightest nod, so small anyone else would have missed it. But I'd learned to read her micro-expressions during the few times she'd acknowledged my existence. It wasn't sympathy. It wasn't pity. It was something far more dangerous. Recognition. She closed her notebook with a soft snap and set it aside. Then she did something she hadn't done all evening. She picked up her champagne glass and took a deliberate sip, her eyes never leaving my father as he prepared to speak. Interesting. I saw her lips form the word, though no sound came out. A server approached her, but she waved him away without looking, her attention fixed on the scene unfolding. Whatever was about to happen, Eleanor Brennan was ready for it. Standing near the service entrance, partially obscured by a potted palm, was a man I'd never seen before. Everything about him seemed deliberately unremarkable. Medium height, brown hair, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting. But his suit told a different story. That was Tom Ford, at least $10,000 worth of tailoring that had been crafted to look modest. He held a phone, but he wasn't scrolling. He was documenting. I watched him capture my father's purple face, my mother's theatrical gestures, Victoria's performed tears. He wasn't recording video. He was taking specific, timed photographs, each one deliberate and methodical. When he shifted position, I caught a glimpse of the briefcase at his feet. Black leather, combination locks, and barely visible in the embossed corner. Miller and Associates, Estate Law. His eyes met Eleanor's across the room. The look they exchanged lasted less than a second, but it was loaded with meaning. She tilted her head slightly toward my father. The man, Miller I assumed, nodded once and returned to his documentation. He photographed the crowd, their eager faces hungry for drama. He captured the 3 tiny spots on Victoria's dress, using his phone's zoom with practiced precision. He even photographed the broken champagne glass on the floor, the one I'd dropped, making sure to capture its position relative to where I stood. "Who's that?" I heard someone whisper. "No idea. Maybe hotel security?" But hotel security didn't wear Tom Ford. Hotel security didn't exchange loaded glances with Eleanor Brennan. And hotel security definitely didn't carry briefcases from estate law firms. Something was happening here, something beyond my public humiliation. The players were positioned, the documentation was being gathered, and I was beginning to realize this might not be the ending my family expected. My father's voice filled the ballroom with the authority of a man who'd never been challenged. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to address what just happened. The crowd leaned in, hungry for more drama. Someone actually shushed their companion to hear better. My daughter Isabel, he said, and the way he emphasized daughter made it sound like an accusation, has always struggled to fit into this family. Despite our best efforts, despite every opportunity we've given her, she remains, he paused, searching for the word, a liability. My mother stood beside him, nodding. Victoria had stopped crying, a small smile playing at her lips. Therefore, my father continued, his voice gaining strength, I want to make something clear, here in front of all of you, our dearest friends and family. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Isabel, the greatest gift you could give your sister for her wedding. He looked directly at me, his eyes cold as winter stone. Is your permanent absence from our family. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a glass. The sound of it shattering seemed to echo forever. We don't want you at the wedding, he continued, each word a nail in a coffin I didn't know he'd been building. We don't want you at family gatherings. The best thing you can do for Victoria, for all of us, is to disappear. Forever. Victoria stepped forward, her voice sweet as poison. It's for the best, Isabel. You know you don't belong here. 75 people stared at me, waiting for my response. Some looked horrified, others entertained, but all of them were witnessing my complete erasure from my own family. The silence stretched, heavy as a funeral shroud. The ballroom erupted in whispers that built to a roar. Phones appeared like weapons, everyone desperate to capture this moment of pure, unfiltered cruelty. I saw at least 12 people actively recording, their cameras trained on my face, waiting for me to break. Oh my God, someone whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. He just disowned her, in public. Did you get that? Another voice asked urgently. Tell me you got that on video. Senator Harrison looked deeply uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. His wife grabbed his arm, whispering urgently in his ear. Even in my shock, I caught her words. This is not the family we thought they were. A woman I recognized as a gossip columnist for the Connecticut Herald was typing furiously on her phone, her eyes bright with the kind of story that would dominate social media for weeks. But the worst part wasn't the strangers. It was the people I'd known for years. My mother's book club friends, who'd eaten my homemade pastries at countless meetings, avoided my eyes. My father's business partners, men who'd praised my apartment management at dinner parties, suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. I stood there, completely alone in a room full of people, my legs trembling but refusing to buckle. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I would not beg. I would not plead. Well, my father demanded, nothing to say? No tears? No begging? He seemed almost disappointed by my silence. The crowd held its collective breath, waiting for my response, for the breakdown that would complete their evening's entertainment. That's when Grandmother Eleanor stood up. The soft scrape of her chair against marble might as well have been a thunderclap. This is where everything changed. But before I reveal what happened next, I want to know, have you ever had a moment where your family showed their true colors in public? Share your story in the comments. It's therapeutic to know we're not alone. And if this is resonating with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear that setting boundaries is not just okay, it's necessary, because what my grandmother was about to reveal would flip the entire power dynamic in that room. The documents, the trust fund, the secrets my parents never knew existed. It all came out in the next 5 minutes. Robert, sit down. My grandmother's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. Every head in the room turned to watch Eleanor Brennan rise from her chair with the deliberate grace of royalty. My father's face went from purple to white in the span of a heartbeat. Mother, this doesn't concern. I said, sit down. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. This wasn't the voice of a grandmother at a family gathering. This was the voice of the woman who'd built the Brennan empire from nothing, who'd turned a small real estate office into a multi-million-dollar corporation before women were even allowed to have business credit cards. My father sat. He didn't want to. You could see the resistance in every muscle. But he sat. Eleanor walked toward the center of the room, her cane clicking against the marble in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. The crowd parted before her like the Red Sea. "You just disowned the wrong grandchild," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "And you did it in front of 75 witnesses." "Mother, you don't understand," my mother started. "I understand perfectly, Margaret." Eleanor's eyes were arctic. "I understand that you've spent 28 years punishing Isabel for the crime of being born second. I understand that you've taken her work, her dedication, her love, and treated it like garbage." She turned to face the crowd, addressing them directly. "I also understand that my son is about to learn exactly how much power he doesn't have in this family." My father's face had gone from white to gray. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "Mr. Miller, I believe it's time." The man in the Tom Ford suit stepped out from behind the potted palm, his movements so smooth it seemed choreographed. "Good evening. I'm James Miller, senior partner at Miller & Associates, and Mrs. Eleanor Brennan's personal attorney for the past 30 years. He set his briefcase on the nearest table with deliberate precision, the locks clicking open in the silence. The sound seemed to echo off the marble walls. "Miss Isabel," he said, turning to me with the kind of respect my family had never shown. "As per the terms of your trust fund, established by your grandmother when you were born, certain conditions have now been met." "What trust fund?" My mother's voice cracked. "There's no trust fund." Miller pulled out a thick manila folder, the kind that held life-changing documents. "The Isabel Rose Brennan Irrevocable Trust, established 28 years ago with an initial deposit of $5 million, now valued at approximately $15 million with interest and investments." The sound that came from my father's throat wasn't quite human. "Furthermore," Miller continued, his voice professional and measured, "as of her 21st birthday, Miss Isabel has been the legal owner of the Stamford property, though she's graciously allowed the family to believe otherwise while she managed it." Victoria's perfectly composed face finally cracked. "That's impossible. Daddy owns that building." "No," Miller said simply. "Your father manages the paperwork. The deed has been in Miss Isabel's name for 7 years. She's also a voting member of the Brennan Corporation Board, holding 30% of shares, more than any individual family member except Mrs. Eleanor herself." "You're lying," my father managed to choke out. Miller smiled thinly. "I have the documents right here. All notarized, all legal, all binding." 30%? My father's voice had gone hoarse. "That's impossible. I would have known. I would have seen the paperwork." "You saw what you expected to see," Eleanor said coldly. "Every document you signed for the family trust was actually strengthening Isabel's position. You never read the fine print because you assumed I'd always favor Victoria, just like you did." Miller spread the documents across the table like a dealer showing a winning hand. "Miss Isabel owns the Stamford building outright, all 23 units generating $400,000 annually. She holds 30% of Brennan Corporation voting shares. She's the beneficiary of a $15 million trust that becomes fully accessible on her 30th birthday, or immediately if she's publicly disowned by her parents." He paused, letting that sink in. "Which, thanks to your announcement in front of 75 witnesses, just happened." The room exploded. Guests gasped, phones came out, and the gossip columnist looked like she'd won the lottery. But I couldn't focus on any of them. I was staring at the papers, at my name printed over and over again in legal black and white. "You've been living in my building for 4 years, Dad," I said quietly, finding my voice at last. "Paying rent to me. I processed every payment, fixed every problem, and you never once wondered why your signature wasn't on any of the legal documents." Victoria grabbed the nearest paper, her hands shaking. "This has to be fake. Grandma would never." I would, and I did, Eleanor interrupted, because I saw what you all refused to see. Isabel has been running this family's assets for years while you played dress up and called yourself an influencer. And there's one more thing, Miller added, his voice cutting through the chaos. I stood up slowly, my legs finally steady. The trembling had stopped. For the first time in 28 years, I felt the solid ground of my own power beneath my feet. You want me gone? I said, my voice calm and clear. I accept. I walked to the table where Miller had spread the documents, picked up the pen he offered, and began signing. Each signature was deliberate, final, a punctuation mark on years of invisibility. Effective immediately, I'm withdrawing from all family operations, I announced, my voice carrying the kind of authority I'd never been allowed to use before. The Stamford building accounts will be frozen for transition to my personal management company. All automatic payments to Brennan Corporation from my properties cease as of midnight tonight. Wait, my father said, his voice strangled. The Stamford building generates 70% of our liquid income. I'm aware, I said simply, signing another document. I've been managing your books for 4 years, remember? Though you called it helping out. Victoria stepped forward, her perfect composure finally shattered. You can't do this. The wedding venue needs the final payment tomorrow. That's $300,000. That sounds like a you problem, I said, using her favorite phrase from our childhood. Maybe ask your influencer sponsors for help. Isabel, please, my mother said, and it was the first time she'd said my name all evening without sneering. Let's discuss this privately. Privately? I set down the pen and looked at her directly. You made this public. You announced my exile in front of everyone who matters to you, so everyone can witness the consequences. I turned to Miller. Please ensure all transitions are completed by Monday morning. Already in motion, Miss Brennan. Wait, you can't do this? My mother's carefully maintained composure cracked completely. The Harrison merger depends on our property portfolio. The wedding venue needs payment. Victoria grabbed my arm. 300,000 by tomorrow, or they'll cancel everything. The corporate credit line, my father said, his voice hollow. You're the guarantor. Without you, the bank will. Call in the loan. Yes, I know. I gently removed Victoria's hand from my arm. You might want to liquidate some assets quickly. Let's discuss this privately, my father tried again, his commanding voice now pleading. We can work something out. You made it public, it stays public, I said, gesturing to the 75 witnesses, half of whom were still recording. These people watched you disown me. They can watch you face the consequences. Senator Harrison cleared his throat. Robert, perhaps we should postpone tomorrow's merger discussion, given the circumstances. The wedding, Harrison's son said quietly to Victoria. Maybe we should reconsider the scale. Reconsider? Victoria's voice pitched toward hysteria. We have 500 guests coming, who you'll now need to pay for yourself, I reminded her. I've been covering vendor deposits from the building account. That ends tonight. My mother grabbed my father's arm. Do something. But what could he do? The documents were legal. The witnesses were plentiful. The disownment had been public and unequivocal. Miss Isabel, Miller said, your car is waiting outside whenever you're ready. I looked around the ballroom one last time, at the crystal chandeliers I'd selected, the flowers I'd arranged, the seating charts I'd spent weeks perfecting, all for people who'd just erased me from their lives. I'm ready now, I said. I hadn't even reached my car when the first domino fell. My phone lit up with a Google alert. Someone had already posted the video. Connecticut real estate mogul disowns daughter at 2-hour wedding event. The view count was climbing. 10K, 15K, 20K in minutes. By the time I reached my apartment, it had hit 50K views, and how our toxic family was trending locally. The Connecticut Herald's gossip columnist had worked fast. Her article was already live. Brennan family drama. Daughter disowned, then reveals she owns everything. The comments section was brutal. Karma came dressed as a grandmother, read the top comment with 500 likes. 3 text messages came in rapid succession from my father's business partners. Robert, given tonight's events, we're pulling out of the Westport development. The Harrison merger is off the table. Call me when your house is in order. My wife says if this is how you treat family, we can't trust you with our investment. Victoria's Instagram was hemorrhaging followers. I watched the count drop in real time, 100K to 95K to 90K. The comments under her last post, a photo of her wedding shoes, were savage. Imagine being so cruel to your sister. Money can't buy class. Your sister planned your whole wedding and this is how you thank her? The wedding hashtag had Victoria, and Harrison Forever had been hijacked. Instead of congratulations, it was filled with screenshots from the video, zoomed in on my parents' cruel faces, Victoria's smirk, my quiet dignity in that simple black dress. Within 3 hours, the Brennan family name had become synonymous with public cruelty, and there was nothing their money could do to stop it. But the worst was yet to come for Victoria. Monday morning brought a cascade of financial disasters. Without my signature, the corporate credit line was frozen. The wedding vendors, who'd seen the viral video, demanded immediate payment in full. No more payment plans for the notorious Brennans. The bill was staggering. Venue, $300,000. Catering for $500,000, $200,000. Flowers, $75,000. Orchestra and entertainment, $100,000. Photography and videography, $50,000. Designer dress alterations, $25,000. Miscellaneous, $50,000. Total due, $800,000. Due immediately, or face public lawsuits that would further damage their reputation. We need to sell the Hampton house, I heard my father tell my mother in a voicemail she'd accidentally sent me. Today, take whatever offer we can get. They listed it for $3.2 million, desperate for quick cash. It sold in 48 hours for $2.4 million, a loss of $800,000 from what they'd paid. The buyer? One of my grandmother's shell companies, though they wouldn't discover that for months. The Stamford building, my building, had been their primary income source. Without it, they couldn't maintain their lifestyle. The country club membership, the yacht club, the charity board positions that required substantial donations, all of it started slipping away. But the cruelest blow was the discovery that Victoria's influencer career had been artificially propped up by payments from the family accounts, payments I'd been processing without questioning. Without that financial support, her engagement rates plummeted. Brands started pulling out, citing recent controversies and brand safety concerns. The princess was about to learn what life felt like without a kingdom funded by the sister she'd despised. But the worst was yet to come for Victoria, I thought, watching her desperate posts trying to salvage her image. Harrison called off the wedding on Tuesday morning. Not postponed, cancelled. His family's publicist released a statement citing irreconcilable differences in family values. But everyone knew the truth. The Harrisons didn't want to be associated with the family whose cruelty had been viewed 12 million times in 4 days. Victoria's breakdown was, predictably, public. She posted a tearful video blaming me for ruining her life, which only made things worse. The comments were merciless. Your sister gave you everything, and you treated her like garbage. The trash took itself out. Team Isabel forever. Her brand partnerships evaporated overnight. The luxury fashion brand she'd been ambassadoring for sent a termination letter. The jewelry company pulled their campaign. The fitness tea she'd been promoting distanced themselves with a public statement about supporting family values and kindness. In 1 week, she lost 100,000 Instagram followers. Her fiancé and dream wedding, brand deals worth $150,000 annually, her apartment, it was in Harrison's name, her reputation. She had to move back into our parents' house, except it wasn't even their house anymore. Without the building income and with the Hampton house sold, they'd had to downgrade to a rental in Norwalk. 3 bedrooms, no pool, no status. The girl who'd worn $15,000 dresses was now shopping at Target, posting desperate content trying to rebuild her following. Day in my life living at home. Got 2,000 views and hundreds of comments about karma. The penthouse apartment she'd wanted to turn into an Airbnb? I lived there for another month while I wrapped up my affairs, then sold it to a lovely young family for twice what my parents thought it was worth. Victoria had lost her kingdom in exactly 7 days. 6 months later, I stood in my new office in Asheville, North Carolina, watching the sunrise paint the Blue Ridge Mountains gold. The nameplate on my door read, Isabel Brennan, principal designer of my own firm, Brennan Interiors. Though I was considering changing the last name, the transformation had been remarkable. Free from my family's shadow, I discovered I wasn't just competent. I was exceptional. My first client came through Eleanor, who'd quietly spread the word among her connections. That led to another, then another. Within 6 months, I had 12 clients and 2 employees, with revenue already hitting $500,000. My apartment was a converted loft in the River Arts District, all exposed brick and soaring windows. I designed it myself, every detail reflecting my taste, not what my family would approve of. Modern but warm, elegant but comfortable. Everything they'd said I could never achieve. Eleanor visited monthly, taking the train down from Connecticut. We'd have lunch at my favorite cafe, where she'd update me on the family's continued struggles and remind me that I'd made the right choice. "Your father asked about you," she said during her latest visit. "And?" "I told him you were dead to him, his words after all." We both smiled at that. The trust fund had given me freedom, but the building income gave me power. I'd hired a professional management company, a real one, and the property was thriving. The tenants, who'd always liked me better than my family, sent a group card on my birthday. "To our favorite landlord who actually cares." Freedom tasted like morning coffee in my own office with my name on the door, in a city where nobody knew I'd once been invisible. The attempts to reconcile started 3 months after I left. First came the texts, 47 from my father, each more desperate than the last. "We need to talk. This has gone too far. Your mother is sick with worry. Please respond. You're destroying this family." Then Victoria, 200 plus messages ranging from rage to manipulation to fake apology. "I hate you. How could you do this to me? I'm sorry, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I need money for rent. Please. I'm your sister." My mother took a different approach, sending a formal letter through her attorney. 4 pages of elegant stationery filled with rewritten history, claiming she'd always loved me equally, that this was all a misunderstanding that family should forgive. I responded with my own attorney's letter, a cease and desist order, followed by a formal no-contact directive. If they continued to harass me, I'd pursue a restraining order. The extinction burst came on Christmas Eve. All 3 of them showed up at my Asheville apartment building. The doorman, whom I'd specifically briefed about this possibility, called me immediately. "Should I call the police, Miss Brennan?" I watched them on the security monitor, my father pacing, my mother crying, Victoria on her phone probably trying to document their journey to reconciliation for social media content. "Yes," I said. "Tell them there are trespassers who've been legally notified to maintain no contact." They left before the police arrived, but not before Victoria posted a tearful video about her heartless sister refusing to see family on Christmas. It got ratioed so hard she deleted it within an hour. Apologies motivated by financial desperation aren't apologies at all. Standing in my office now, a year later, I've learned truths that 28 years in that family never taught me. Boundaries aren't punishment, they're self-preservation. They're not about being cruel to others, but about being kind to yourself. Family isn't an automatic pass for love. Being related by blood doesn't grant anyone the right to destroy your spirit, diminish your accomplishments, or erase your existence. Love isn't shown through words at holiday dinners, but through daily actions, through recognition, through the simple act of seeing someone for who they truly are. Respect must be earned, not expected. My parents expected my respect while giving none in return. They demanded loyalty while showing only betrayal. They required devotion while offering only dismissal. The most profound lesson? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for them, is to walk away. My absence forced them to confront the reality of who they were. Without me to blame, to diminish, to erase, they had to face the empty spaces in their own hearts. Eleanor told me something during her last visit that stays with me. You didn't break the family, darling. You revealed it was already broken. You just stopped being the glue holding together something that should have fallen apart years ago. Blood makes you related, but loyalty makes you family. And I've built a new family here. Friends who celebrate my successes, clients who value my work, a community that sees me not as the invisible second daughter, but as Isabel, whole and worthy on my own terms. The girl who once shook holding a champagne glass now holds her future steady in both hands. And that future? It's entirely mine to build. Thank you for witnessing my story. If you've made it this far, you're probably someone who understands that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. What boundaries have you had to set with family? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this video helped you feel less alone, please share it with someone who might need to hear that their peace is worth more than toxic family approval. Subscribe for more stories about choosing yourself. Remember, you can't heal in the same environment that broke you. Until next time, this is Isabel, choosing freedom over family.